This is Your Anxiety Toolkit, episode number 184. Welcome to Your Anxiety Toolkit. I'm your host, Kimberly Quinlan. This podcast is fueled by three main goals. The first goal is to provide you with some extra tools to help you manage your anxiety. Second goal, to inspire you. Anxiety doesn't get to decide how you live your life. And number three, and I leave the best for last, is to provide you with one big, fat virtual hug. Because experiencing anxiety ain't easy. If that sounds good to you, let's go. Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to Your Anxiety Toolkit podcast. I am so thrilled to have you here. How are you? How are you doing? Checking in. It has been a minute. I know that you've been getting some episodes each week, but I have had actually some time away from recording the podcast, and I'm so happy to be back. We have an amazing guest, Joshua Fletcher, on today. I have had the privilege of getting to know Josh really well over the last couple of months. We started doing some meetings over on Clubhouse and then really got to know each other. I really respect the work he's doing. We now do IG rooms every Friday together, and that's been really fun as well. Amazing psychotherapist who's also has his own lived experience with anxiety and panic. And he comes on today to answer some really great questions about panic and anxiety. And he's just a real gem. So I'm so grateful for him for coming on and sharing his expertise and lovely words. So I'm going to actually let you go straight to listen to that episode today. For those of you who have not left a review yet, please do go over and leave a review. We will be giving away a free pair of Beats headphones to one lucky reviewer once we meet 1,000 reviews. So I am so excited to get that going. You will get to choose your own color. I have not purchased them yet. You will get to pick yourself. And so go over and leave an honest review on the podcast so that I can know how to be better and I can know what's going well and I can get a feel for what's working and what's not. Sending you all my love. I hope you do enjoy this episode. Go and follow Joshua Fletcher on Instagram. He's at AnxietyJosh. You will love him. Okay, well, welcome. I'm actually super excited for this episode. We have Joshua Fletcher here, a psychotherapist, and he's going to share all that he knows about panic disorder and panic attacks. I know it's something that everyone has asked for a lot, particularly regarding past podcasts I've done. So thank you for being here, Joshua.
Thanks for having me on, Kimberly. I've been looking forward to doing this episode with you.
I actually came across you way back, but the reason you're here is because actually a lot of the listeners really requested you to talk about panic. I did an Instagram poll and everyone was like, yay, we want Anxiety Josh on. So
yeah, I feel wanted.
It's so exciting. That's I always feel it's very validating when people are raising their hand for you. So thank you for being here.
I know. Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to talking about panic. And I'll share some of my own experiences with it as well as someone who's been diagnosed with panic disorder and various anxiety disorders. Nearly all of them, actually. It's quite fun. I was collecting them in my young 20s.
Right.
It's quite nice to collect disorders.
Yeah.
Which ones are quite fun to have and which ones are not. But panic is one of the ones that I love working with and talking about.
Would you mind just sharing that story with us?
Yeah, sure. So in my young 20s, I was at work one day and my life was very stressful, extremely stressful, and I would rarely put myself first. I'd go to work in a school with excluded children. So these are children that have behavior difficulties and can't access mainstream education. So that was a stressful job, although I loved it. But when that job is becoming your respite, you're asking for trouble. One day I woke up and I just felt really kind of hyper. And I was like, why have I got so much energy in the morning? I don't usually have energy. And I caught the bus to work and I felt fine and felt all right. And then I got to work and I walked into the staff room and I started to make a cup of tea. fulfilling that British stereotype. As I was making the cup of tea, lo and behold, I was suddenly struck by a bout of derealization, detachment, depersonalization, dissociation. I don't know. I had never even heard of the word anxiety. I was making a cup of tea, and then suddenly I just felt like, whoa, where am I? What's going on? Everything looks weird. Everything looks the same, but feels weird. Looked down at my hand, couldn't quite get it. I could hear myself talking. People's faces looked strange. And I thought, wow, I've finally done it. I've broken my brain. I've lost my mind. This was coming, Josh. It was coming for a long time, and you've done it. And I turned to my colleagues, and I was like, panicking, surging, the heart started going. I felt sick. I just thought something seriously wrong's with me here. And I couldn't put my finger on it, which was even more scary. I was like, something bad's going to happen. And everyone looked at me with faces of concern and distress. Like, what's up with you? You're usually the clown, the joker, the confident guy. And I was like, I really don't know. And actually I had to get my mum pick me up from work because I did not know what was happening to me. This sense of doom, fear, and that's kick-started panic disorder because I withdrew to my room and I tried to work it out, and I couldn't, and I didn't know what was happening to me. I went to my doctor, and he was like, "What? You feel the sense of derealization? What on earth is that?" I was like, "Everything feels weird. Reality feels different." The doctor was like, "Okay." That sounds normal. I'm going to refer you on to a specialist, and that obviously didn't help. And I didn't know what a panic attack was. I didn't know what anxiety was, and I struggled with agoraphobia after that, or agoraphobia for the transatlantic cousins, and I was stuck there for a good 5-6 months until I finally stumbled across some information about what was happening. Really simple, really. A friend was like, "Oh, that sounds like anxiety." I was like, "Isn't that the word that you give to like exams and going on a first date or something?" And they were like, "No, no, 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 no. Have you got loads of what ifs? Do you not feel like you're in your own body? Do you have all these symptoms? Do you worry about?" Oh, in this time, by the way, I was worried about my heart exploding. I was worried about I'd poison myself. My brain was breaking. I was developing some kind of incurable psychological illness. All of them. And yeah, when someone explained anxiety to me, that helped me recover. And I did recover. And I recovered without medication. I recovered with psychoeducation, support around me, so people not being judgmental. They didn't get it, but at the same time, they weren't being judgmental. And I basically wrote down everything I ever learned about anxiety and made it my project. But it did put me in a dark place. I'm not going to lie. I was very anxious, and it did put me into a state of depression because I was like, this is never going to go away. And then when I realized that it does go away and you can overcome it, I was back on my feet again, and then I overcame it. So that's kind of how my panic disorder started. In those days, by the way, I'd have about 6, 7, 8 panic attacks a day. Panic disorder is, I didn't want to feel like I did at that time in work. I didn't want to feel terrified. I didn't want to feel that sense of doom and terror. So I just planned my entire life to try and avoid that. And that's panic disorder in a nutshell. And it doesn't help because I just spent every day, am I going to panic? Am I going to freak out? Yep, here it comes. And there's a whoosh feeling that a lot of my readers resonate with, the whoosh, like whoosh. And I was scared of the whoosh, and I just spent all day, every day avoiding, not living my life because I was scared of the whoosh.
Right.
I don't know. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it really does. It really does. I remember when I first experienced derealization, my instinct was to go to the eye doctor because it actually started when I was with a client, and all of a sudden, when you see caricatures of people where their bodies are really teeny, but their heads are really giant, like cartoon drawings. I was sitting with a client and that sort of happened. And I was like, I think my eyes are messed up. Like nothing seems real. I'd look at my hand. So my instincts were to panic and be like, I'm losing my eyesight. And he's like, no, you're fine. And that was where I had to basically go back to the drawing board and go, yeah, okay, this is my anxiety talking.
Yeah, and it's interesting that's a trigger too. That is one of the most uncommon triggers though, isn't it? When panic and derealization and depersonalization just go hand in hand because they're very difficult to describe. You can say to people, I'm worried that my heart rate's going to go too high, and people can, on some level, can empathize with that. But where's the socially acceptable rhetoric to say, my reality doesn't feel right? Is everything a simulation?
Yeah.
No, Josh, go to bed, take your medication.
Right.
It's like, but
Right.
actually it's a really normal phenomena.
Right. Right. And I think that too is as you're trying to explain it, you're also doubting yourself. And so in your description, when you share it with a doctor, you're like, I don't know, but maybe I'm going, am I real? What's happening? So even in your description, it sounds strange to them because they probably obviously haven't been educated. The ones who have been educated are like, oh, I know what's happening. You know, it's similar to your friend. So I get you. It's a hard thing to articulate in the moment.
Absolutely. It's really important. And but anyway, when I was reassured, like you, I'm sure you were reassured at some point, like this is okay. I realized that I pinned a lot of it on my derealization, depersonalization. When actually panic attacks and panic was, as you know, it was a complete lack of belief that I could cope with overwhelming feelings. And I didn't believe I could. I believed that if I allowed these feelings to take over, something bad would happen. I.e., and it's always the same three, isn't it? What if I lose control? What if I die? What if I freak out? Or actually there's four. What if I'm humiliated?
Right.
And I think that's were the four core fears. So rather than pinning it on, I work with a lot of clients and a lot of people on social media like, oh, I'm afraid to go out because my depersonalization. Like, you're not. You're afraid of how it makes you feel. And I think that's kind of what I went through, and that's what I work with people. It's like, it's okay. When people realize you can go out, you can have the pounding heart, the derealization, the dizziness, the nausea, the IBS, the sweating, the shaking, the feeling lopsided, the closed up throat, the racing thoughts that are just so intrusive, the feeling of doom and imminent terror, like it's going to happen, like all these things are going to come together and it's going to happen. When you realize that it's all a lie, it's all an illusion, it's a mechanism that's very powerful and very helpful, but not in this situation. But mostly when you realize you can tolerate that, and it doesn't actually last that long, the closer you go towards it, it's a very liberating feeling. But don't get me wrong, it takes courage to do that. It's very, a lot of people say, oh, exposure works, but people don't really understand. You need the building blocks to expose. You need to be like, right, I completely get anxiety now.
Right.
And now here we go. I'm going to go into the grocery store and, wrestle a cucumber or something for 20 minutes until my anxiety passes.
Well, and I love that you use the word, that a big piece for you, and you can tell me if I'm rephrasing this incorrectly, but the psychoeducation has to be that first piece of the work, right? Is sort of being educated about what is happening isn't reassurance. It's important to understand those mechanisms. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say if I was to pluck a completely arbitrary percentage out of the air, I'd say it's 75% of the whole thing.
Right.
Like once you know what's happening, you demystify the fear of the unknown, which anxiety loves. If you don't know what's happening, it thrives off it.
Right.
One of the things I hear a lot on my social media is, you're reading my mind. I was like, I'm not. I'm reading the mechanisms of your anxious mind because they're the same for everyone.
Right.
And actually, they're quite simplistic in any presentation of anxiety disorder. You take, social anxiety, health anxiety, your field, obsessive compulsive disorder, intrusive thoughts. The universal factor is, I don't like how it makes me feel, and I don't believe I can cope with it. So I need to do something in order to cope with it. Right. And that is the universal rule for all anxiety. When you realize you don't have to do anything, that's the liberating factor, thanks to psychoeducation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so against your intuition, right? Because your intuition or your natural, biological response is like, to get the heck out of here, right? Like, there's danger. I got to get out of here. And it's in it. I know a lot of my patients and social media followers at the start are always like, you said what? You want me to have that feeling? Like what? That's
suffer. Yeah. I want you to suffer.
Right. But I actually tell my clients, if they say, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe I had the worst panic attack, I'll often say, like, I'm not upset by that. That doesn't upset me at all. I actually am okay with you. I'm okay with you having that feeling.
Oh, I love that. And absolutely, like, I come across as cruel sometimes with my clients. They're like, they come to the session like, I'm so happy to tell you I've been 2 weeks without any panic. I'm like, that doesn't interest me.
You're like, that doesn't
They're
make
like,
me happy at
why?
all.
That's so cruel. I was like, no, because recovery is, and I said this the other day, but like, recovery is when you willfully tolerate panic.
Mm.
So if you've been 2 weeks without even tolerating panic, then I'm happy for you. I'm happy you've had 2 weeks of normality, so you know you're not broken. But I'm interested in your full recovery. So I want you to come to me and say, you know what, I've been pretty calm, but I had some panic that came up the other day, and you know what, I allowed it to be there, and then I just did what your magic rule, Josh, and just do what you'd usually do. Do what non-anxious you would do. If you're in a room and you're feeling anxious, if you're watching TV and you're feeling anxious and you leave, you're telling the panic response that it's important. If you're in a grocery store and you leave because you're panicking, you're telling the panic response it's important. If you want to go for a walk, but you have to take your partner or a false comfort to help you survive, then you're telling anxiety it's important. And what you need to do is, I mean, anxiety is important, it's good for you, but you're allowing it to dictate your life where you withdraw, and you also reaffirming this core belief that you cannot cope with it. And so, yeah, you're right. Like, it's okay to have that feeling. It's supposed to be there, just not in that circumstance.
Right.
You know? So, and that's where disorder comes from. It's disordered. It's not. I fight a lot with therapists here in the UK. They're like, stop medicalizing mental health field. I'm like, I'm not medicalizing mental health field. Disorder literally means it's out of order.
Yeah.
If I'm having a panic attack in the supermarket, it means it's out of order.
Right.
So I'm going to put it back in order again.
Exactly. No, exactly. And people only come to us because something's not working anymore and they want it to work. Right. So that I completely agree with.
Miracle cure.
It is. It is. Do you, in your practice, I'm curious, because you know a lot of what I do with clients is exposure and response prevention. Do you do that with your panic clients, or do you have them just live their life? And if panic shows up, they have to just, like you said, your miracle rule, not your miracle rule, but your core rule. So what is your approach to panic in treatment?
Yeah, you do the homework, you do exposure with panic. For me, because I'm trained in both cognitive behavior therapy and humanistic, and I love humanistic, so I want to know the person behind it. And if someone's not confident in themselves to approach panic yet, I don't ring that bell. I don't ring the exposure bell yet. You know, I'll be like, well, do you know what's happening? Reassure them they're okay. And we could pick through certain issues, because panic attacks don't come from nowhere. They come as a result of stress. You know, I often use the stress analogy, the jug analogy. When your stress jug is filled up and overflows, that's when you usually get your first panic. Like I did at work. My life was very stressful. This was coming, you know, and it usually happens to people around change, when there's certain, even good stress can add to the stress jug. And that's when it occurs. And so I'll sit there and go, well, what's been happening recently? Because, and make them feel heard, because they are being listened to. Not make them feel heard, pretending I'm listening. And then when they're ready, I'll be like, well, actually, here's how we can turn off this threat response. And I always call it threat response. I don't even call it anxiety anymore. I call it a threat response, because it is the same, you know, with panic attacks, with anything, intrusive thoughts, with OCD, it's a threat response. You engage with it, you tell it it's important. If you don't, whatever. And you just practice a little bit at a time, you know, whether it's graded exposure or flooding and just running straight in and doing it, you know. So that's how I work, a bit of half and half. I obviously look at what kind of anxiety they have, whether it's conventional anxiety, you know, I'm worried about my career, my job, my self-esteem, whatever. Or you analyze whether or not it's disordered anxiety, which often, and again, I annoy therapists with this, it doesn't really have a root cause. You know, I have a fear of panic, right? You know, so tell me how your father rejected you. Well, he did, but it's nothing to do with my panic. Like, I've dealt with that. I just had a panic attack, and I hated feeling that bad. I don't want to do it again. Right. Yeah, so you withdrew, and let's find the root cause. There's no root cause. The root cause is I'm fearing panic attacks.
Yeah, it's very biological and physiological, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You had the feeling and you wanted to run away, which reinforced it. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. In fact, that's a huge piece of why I do the work I do, is because, and I say this all the time, is by the time someone comes to me, they've tried that therapy and they're feeling really hopeless because the panic is still reinforcing. In fact, I've had many people come saying that their previous clinician or medical provider was saying, don't do those things that scare you. Like if it scares you, don't do that. And I always feel so sad by that because that's so disempowering, like to be told not to do scary things.
Couldn't agree with you more. It's because, and I had this chat with our friend Drew, where and I kind of instilled more hope in therapy with him because he was very kind of, wow, therapists, why they don't know. It depends on the modality of things. So in certain modalities of therapy, there's a subscription that all suffering has a narrative, whereas a lot of disordered anxiety does not have a narrative. And that can be really quite harmful, not harmful in a physical way, but preventative of recovery. So if you've got a therapist saying, well, if it scares you, don't do it, it comes from a good place. But actually, it's the lack of knowledge in that modality of anxious presentation. It's not their fault. But of course, the sad thing for me is, as a therapist who respects all modalities and thinks there's a place for them all, that one bad experience of someone in therapy who didn't get it, and you must hear that all the time, Kimberly, like, they just don't get it. You know, they have an experience with a therapist who didn't get it, then they kind of blanket statement all of therapy.
Yeah.
You know, therapy, I tried therapy. It was rubbish.
Right.
You know, well, you need to find the appropriate therapy.
Right. Yeah. So this is actually a really great segue. This is, we're talking about panic, and the trick is to either lean into the fear or just go about your life. And if fear shows up, go about your life. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Wait, hold on. I'm walking down the street. I'm in the park, and suddenly I get the whoosh. Oh, wow, everything feels weird. Heart's pounding. I feel like I'm going to die. I'm having intrusive thoughts about killing my family. I feel like I'm going to freak out, end up in the back of a van in a padded room for the rest of my life. Oh, right. Okay. Well, that's anxiety. That's adrenaline. That's a whoosh. It's just adrenaline going through my brain. My thinking brain's trying to help me by working out why I feel this way. But I know this. It's a pattern. I'm going to keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing. All my instinct, literal instinct, says go home, and I'm going to ignore it. That's why you got to ignore going with your gut. Go with your gut. No, I'm going to ignore my gut. I'm going to go with my brain. And I'm going to keep walking through the park. And if I'm shaking and sweating, it does not matter because it passes. And 20 minutes later, you'll feel fine. You'll feel like Superman. Well done.
There you go. That's it. We're done.
No, get on with it. Go to the park. I don't care if it's 1 a.m. No, don't do that.
Yeah, I love it. See, and I actually really like the way you just did it, which is to demonstrate how to talk back to fear, right? So as if, it's sort of like you just had a conversation on talking yourself through that. So I love it. What about those who love this idea and still find themselves in a fight and flight? A lot of people I know, probably the biggest rebuttal to my explanation of similar to that is, but I can't. I want to know your thoughts, but I can't get on the elevator. I can't handle this discomfort.
Well, in one of my books, and I'm not just plugging that, genuinely, I dedicate a whole chapter to the 3 core statements of anxiety. The obvious one is what if? What if I get in the elevator and freak out? What if I get in the elevator and it breaks down? That's happened to me, by the way. What if I have a heart attack in the elevator? That's statement number 1. Statement number 2 is for people with low-level anxiety, and that's I should do this. And I bet you're a person, and like me, who has loads of to-do lists, and if you sit down for too long, I should be doing this, chasing a feeling of productivity. And that's a kind of subtle one that people misinterpret as being helpful. I should, but it can be helpful, but a lot of times it's not. And the last one is I can't, which is ultimate avoidance. So whether you always change an I can't with I choose not to. I choose not to get in the lift because of my number 1, what ifs. I can't because I have a what if, even though I know I should. and there's your three core statements. I can't get in the elevator because what if I have a panic attack? And I can'ts are just a what if, but as a blanket statement.
Yeah.
So I'd say to those people, it's okay at the moment Don't beat yourself up for not going in there, but you can, because it's nothing to do with the elevator. That's what I say to people. It's nothing. You can practice elevator anxiety, not in the elevator, because you're practicing with your sensations. And anywhere that triggers those sensations, you go practice. And then the elevator can be the last bit, and I'd say this to people with flying anxiety. So that, like, you're not even afraid of the plane. You're afraid of not coping on the plane. Mm-hmm. You're not afraid of the elevator. You're afraid of not coping in the elevator. You're not afraid of, people with panic attacks and agoraphobia go hand in hand, don't they? You're not afraid of leaving your town. You're afraid of not coping leaving your town. So, yeah, that's what I'd say to people saying I can't. You can't at the moment, but you choose because you're choosing not to. Right. But you can because you can practice tolerating your symptoms of anxiety.
Right. Yeah, I really love that. And I think the thing that I sort of want to keep you here and keep asking is, some people I've found get really quite defensive at that, right? Have you found that?
It's your choice sometimes. I don't know. I ask people every time, what do you want from therapy? And if they say, it's often a question that people can't lie about, and you have defensive people. So I bring it back and say, well, what do you want from therapy? Mm. Right. I want you to give me the miracle fix, the mantra, the cure, the CBD oil, the magnesium, the rescue remedy, the something to make my fear of my own fear go away. I was like, yeah, okay, right, here's a magic banana, eat that, and you won't be afraid of spiders anymore. But the irony is that would freak you out.
Right.
If I tapped a button and took away your anxiety, it's a paradox, because that would make you feel out of control and trigger anxiety.
Right.
So that's how it doesn't work like that.
Right.
You've got to go through it yourself. So yeah, I say to them, like, what do you want? If you don't want to leave, that's okay. I'm not going to pressure or shame you into it. But what do you want from therapy? And I'll show you this is how we can do it. And like yourself and me, I've been there, and I can put myself in the head and say, I can see it. You're there. Even thinking about leaving the house or going to that scary place triggers anxiety right now where you are sat. That's okay. That's a threat response. It's trying to keep you safe, but you're in charge of, you can turn that threat response off by showing it. Can't tell it, unfortunately,
right.
But you can show it.
Yeah, good point. I love that. No, I've had the same. Often when people get either defensive or very confused by that, I'll often have to say, you're not going to get around this without going through, as cliche as that sounds, a panic attack, right? Like, no amount of psychoeducation is going to have you avoid them completely. You're going to have to go through several panic attacks to master this, at least, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, right. Absolutely. And rule number one, I don't even use the word panic attack. It's called threat response, adrenal rush. They're all the same. Because, I don't know who coined the term panic attack. Nothing's attacking.
Yes.
Think of the connotations. Like, Kim Quinlan attacked me last weekend. What? She sounds awful. Just stay away from her.
Right.
Whereas Kim Quinlan challenged me to sit there with an adrenaline rush last weekend. Oh, she sounds supportive.
Right. Right.
Are you having an adrenaline rush or a panic attack? And an adrenaline rush is way more accurate.
Yeah.
It is way more accurate. It's less scary. It's more accurate. It's got less scary negative connotations. You're not being attacked. Nothing is attacked. You're not even being harmed. So it doesn't even constitute being attacked. Okay, you're uncomfortable, but reframe that term panic attack. I always do. It sounds like, is your threat response at a 10 again? That's what I say to clients. Your threat response can be a 1 to a 10. Where is it now? Sat at home, a 5. Okay. Do you want to practice with it being a 10? Yeah, great. Go and practice with it being a 10. They walk. Oh yeah, I got it to a 10, but then it came down. What did it come down to? A 3, a 2. Wow. That's even lower than when you were sat at home before you didn't do that. What happened? I think my adrenaline ran out because I challenged it. Yeah, it did. Well done. Yeah. See you next week.
See, I love that. And I've never actually thought of that, the sort of not calling it a panic attack. The reason that resonates with me is I always say to clients, don't say things that aren't true, right? So if you say, like you did before, like saying I can't is actually not true. It's I'm choosing not to in the most compassionate way. Or a lot of clients will say, I'm freaking out. I'm having a panic attack. And I'll say, well, don't say things that aren't true. You're not freaking out. That would require a whole different level of psychological symptoms, right? But I like that because it sort of very much lines up with it's not true to say it's an attack. I really love that. Thank you. That's going to be going into my tool belt today.
Yeah, tool belts. Yeah, I love it. No, and it's great. And again, if I want to model it as someone who's been through anxiety, I'd say, right, okay, let's do a checklist here. I call it the anxiety umbrella. It's something I coined, right? Rather than picking each individual symptom and worrying about them, like, whoa, am I derealizing? Whoa, is my heart rate going? Whoa, am I going to throw up? Whoa, is my thoughts are going so fast I can't ground. I feel like this sensation, like I'm lifting off. What is going on? This feels awful. Something awful is about to happen. I always say, put up your anxiety umbrella, because all that is a shower of adrenaline. It's the one thing, and it will pass. And what's really nice at the end of it as well is that you feel really good. I don't know if you've ever had a panic attack, Kim, but at the end of it, you're like, whoo. You feel like you just got off a roller coaster. Like, yeah, that's nice.
Right.
That's
Well, I do. I mean, this is my whole philosophy is it's a beautiful day to do hard things. That's what I say to all my clients. They all roll their eyes and they're like, I know I have to do the hard thing and it's a beautiful day to do it, right? Like that's what I say every day. And I agree with you. A reason I know a lot of people have said that's helpful is because if you just see it as a hard thing, for me, this is language, right? So you would say it's under the umbrella. I'd say it's just a hard thing, right? Oh, that's just another version of a hard thing. I like that you call it the umbrella because I think it covers all the things that, look at what we talked about today. Intrusive thoughts, derealization, sensations, the whoosh, all of these sensations. So that's a really cool way of looking at it, like under the umbrella.
I'm a simple person. I live in the north of England. I'm simple. I don't want, if anyone's seen Game of Thrones, you've seen the northern folk. And they're not interested in dialogue. They just want to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Now, oh my God, intrusive thoughts. What if that happens? What if that happens? Oh my God, and that's going to be awful. I'm going to live all that out, and that's going to go bad. Oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack. Or is it just an adrenaline rush?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It really is just an adrenaline rush.
Right.
And it makes sense because if I go towards something I fear, my body releases adrenaline. Like, think about, and I always reassure people that they can do it. How many job interviews have you sat outside with your legs shaking, feeling and wanted to run home, but you went to it? How many kind of first dates have you been on that you didn't want to go to, but then you did it because you sat with adrenaline, you sat through it, you felt nervous, you flushed up, but you still did it because you can do it. And all that, well, every time you avoid, it's just because, what if I can? Yeah. And then you've got to go toe to toe with that adrenaline rush and say, well, I can sit with adrenaline for a minute. I can detach from it and just, I don't know, whatever. I've still got my Game Boy from having panic attacks, not as a source of avoidance, just like, well, I can either sit here and imagine my demise or just play a Game Boy on a park bench until my panic finishes. And I still have it.
Exactly. And again, and this is why I bring up Drew, because he says the same as me. And I think you're saying the same thing, which is to do nothing at all except do what you would have done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What would you be doing right now? But that's the problem for a lot of people with panic disorder. When people have had panic attacks for so long, they've forgotten what they do. And that's, again, what I do with my clients. Before I go do exposure, they need to know what their lives would look like first. Perhaps I'd be baking. Perhaps I'd be talking to a friend on the phone. Perhaps I'd be painting. I said, well, why aren't you doing that then? Oh, just in case I need to keep an eye on my panic. No, you don't. If you panic, keep painting.
Yeah.
You might have a few wayward strokes, but that'll be a masterpiece and sell for millions. So.
Well, and I think that speaks to, just one other thought is, I think that speaks to the degree of hypervigilance that goes with panic, right? This feeling of like you have to be looking around all the time and like really paying such attention to the such small ways that it could show up, right? Like, I think that is a huge piece of the panic symptom under that umbrella, like you said. What would you say to a person who feels a significant experience of hypervigilance around their life?
I'd say that hypervigilance is the worst part of anxiety. I'd say it's categorically the most life-sapping part of an anxiety condition. And some people will say to me, what? Panic attacks are the worst. They feel the worst. Panic attacks, adrenaline rushes last for 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
The anticipation of I've been speaking a lot about anticipatory or anticipatory. Anxiety is the worst part
Yeah.
of anxiety because it consumes your attention, and like you said, through hypervigilance. If I spend 12 hours a day in hypervigilance, like a meerkat, literally is what meerkats do. I call it meerkat mode. I'm just looking for danger all day, and you're missing the day because you're looking for it. That's the stuff. That's like generalized anxiety disorder stuff. That's the stickiest, worst part of anxiety. Because that stuff, like when you're like 5 out of 10 on your anxiety scale, but that's the one that's quite insidious, that kind of just goes under the radar, that affects your life so much. Whereas panic, you get it to 10 out of 10. Oh, that's great. And then your body runs out of adrenaline and you just feel calm again. So what I'd say is that you think you're doing yourself a favor by avoiding panic, but actually it's the hypervigilance, the meerkat mode that's sapping your life.
Yeah. And what would be your skills to help shift away or shift in a different direction from that? Or maybe that's not even the best way to ask the question. What's your response to someone who's having either voluntary or involuntary hypervigilance?
Brilliant. So I believe hypervigilance is mostly involuntary, but you can choose to give it attention.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling hypervigilant, like, ooh, I'm on edge, something bad's going to happen. Psychoeducation first, layer 1, that is cortisol. That's why people have morning anxiety, because shots of cortisol wake you up. So they wake up going, oh, I feel anxious. I've opened my eyes. What have I done? How am I anxious? I've not even thought about it. Well, that's because of the cortisol. So you need to step outside of things and go, right, I'm hypervigilant because like a meerkat on the edge of my burrow, I've got cortisol pumping through my system where I'm looking for predators. This is an old primitive response. Now, what am I doing to maintain this response? If I'm engaging in those hyperactive meerkat behaviors, then I'm keeping it on for longer than it needs to be. So what I need to do is commit my attention as much as I can, and it's difficult, I know, really difficult, but if I can commit 50% of my attention away from hypervigilance to something that I perhaps usually be doing, like a puzzle or whatever, then I'm already rewiring my brain.
Yeah.
The self-critical people will go, but I can't give it all my attention, so I give up, so I just keep focusing on the hypervigilance. No, don't. You taking your attention away from it as much as you can is enough. You are telling your brain and the amygdala, I don't want this response on. Do what non-anxious me would do, and you're right on the path. Obviously, it's a bit trickier when you've got compulsions and stuff on there, but in general, that's the general rule.
Right. And even those small shifts can make big differences in the brain. So I think you're right on target there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so I want to be respectful of your time, and I love this. So is there anything you feel...
I'm really enjoying this chat. We can talk for as long as you want.
Well, I actually could easily go right into health anxiety, but I'm actually going to pause this because I think that this conversation needs to then, if later you're ever interested, we could do one on the health anxiety piece, because I think panic is so linked there with health anxiety, right? So if you would like, we can do that. But just now that we're talking about panic, is there anything that you feel like, as a final statement, that we haven't stated that you feel like is important for people to take away from this episode?
Yeah. There's no such thing as a panic attack. It is an adrenaline rush. Panic attacks become a problem when you fear the adrenaline rush. That's all panic disorder is. It'd be nice if doctors just explain that straight away. Panic attacks can't hurt you, because adrenaline rushes can't hurt you. You can cope. And my favorite words in kind of CBT and that ilk is willful tolerance. Willful tolerance is recovery. And my second favorite word is practice. Because in practice, you're supposed to get it wrong. So if you go out now and be like, right, I'm going to do willful tolerance for my panic, and you don't quite get it right, and you do withdraw a little bit, that's okay. You've practiced it. You've practiced willfully tolerating it. You're not going to nail it. I certainly did not nail it. I have spent so many times walking out of music gigs, sitting on the end in movie theaters just in case I could escape, avoiding social events, avoiding things just in case I panicked, not leaving my hometown. And I practiced willful tolerance. I didn't do it straight away. And for someone with quite a self-critical, high expectations inner voice, that really annoyed me. But what panic disorder and panic attacks taught me, which I'll never take back, and I'm so glad I developed anxiety disorders, is that it almost put me in a quandary where the only way I could get out was to learn self-compassion. And if you can do that, then I'd exchange the skill of self-compassion for hundreds of panic attacks, which I've experienced, and they were fun. Not. And yeah, I think I would. Sorry, I was going off on a bit of a pontificating rant there. But yeah, that's what I would say. Stop seeing it as an affliction, as an illness. See it as your body's way of saying this isn't sustainable. Something is right, and actually, it's a chance to show you that you can cope with your biggest fears because you've coped every day so far, and you will carry on coping.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love that so much. I've repeated so many times. One of my clients at the beginning of COVID said, I've trained for this, because he had worked through so many anxiety panic attacks that COVID was just another opportunity. He said, we trained for this. This is what we trained for. I like that. And I just, it was so good for me to hear too, because I was like, you're right. I've trained for this too, even though I felt like I knew nothing of what I was doing. So yeah, I agree. I love that.
That's excellent. And there's another thing as well that I found. Almost every person who struggles with panic attacks are amazing in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely amazing. And almost every person with panic disorder goes, actually, yeah, I remember when my auntie became ill and I was the person driving her to the hospital and everyone else was freaking out. I was like, because you're already in crisis mode. You're well versed in it. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. There's such a resilience.
I feel normal.
Right.
The world's burning around me and I feel normal.
Exactly. And they are the many beautiful lessons that come from these really hard times, right? Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. I'm so happy we did this. Thank you so much for being on.
Loved it.
Tell us where we can hear about your books and all that you do.
So my name is Anxiety Josh, but it isn't. I wasn't christened that. What we call Anxiety, surname Josh.
On my birth certificate. Explain that to my passport people.
My social media guys is Anxiety Josh. My name's Joshua Fletcher. I've written a couple of self-help books for panic attacks called Anxiety, Panicking About Panic, and Anxiety, Practical About Panic. Because in response to the first book, everyone was like, we needed more practical tips. I was like, well, fine, I'll rewrite it with practical tips. And so I did that. I've got my own podcast called The Panic Pod, which I'm definitely going to get you on because I want to do an episode on OCD, which would be brilliant. So you can check out The Panic Pod. And Anxiety Josh on Instagram. I don't know what. Yeah. I've got a new book coming out as well with another that's coming out in the next couple of weeks called Untangle Your Anxiety. Keep an eye out for that. I used a metaphor because I'm clever.
Tell me, I need to know.
Just that. I'm untangling your anxiety. And on the cover of the book, there's like something tangled. And then that's you untangling it. And I've co-written that with an Instagram page called DLC Anxiety. Well, that's going to get out in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, congratulations.
Just an introduction to stuff. Yeah.
Massive respect for you. Writing a book is not easy.
Oh, it's really isn't.
You've gone 3 times into this terrible process. I can't believe it.
Well, what inspired me was doing my master's, which is academic writing. And if you can do academic writing for a year, writing a book is it's joyful. Because you're like, I don't need to put in needless citations.
I have such respect for you and all the work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I've really enjoyed this one.
Please note that this podcast or any other resources from cbtschool.com should not replace professional mental health care. If you feel you would benefit, please reach out to a provider in your area. Have a wonderful day and thank you for supporting cbtschool.com.